Welcome to AI Stopwatch, dispatches from a world racing to extinction. My name is Tango Batelli, and this is the Daily Digest for Sunday, July 26th. Either way, you learn something. Why questions from constituents matter, and how OpenAI might dodge an investigation. By Haven Harms and Mitchell Howe. First, let's read our guest post by Haven Harms. Why candidates need to hear your AI questions now. What happened when I asked congressional candidates about AI risk? Meet the candidates. I walked into the assembly hall at Crown Point Circle, my sweaty hands clutching the small binder that held my printed out question. I claimed an aisle seat a few rows from the front for easy access to the microphone, and my husband sat down next to me. Candidates Heidi Hall and Chris Bennett settled into oversized armchairs on stage. The moderator announced that Congressman Amy Barra would try to call in from D.C., but might not make it. That evening in early March, I was at the Meet the Candidates event, hosted by the Democratic Women of Nevada County, to hear from the candidates running to represent California's 3rd Congressional District. Unlike many focused on AI governance, I don't live in San Francisco or DC, but in the rural foothills of the Western Sierra, in a town that makes you think, wow, this looks straight out of a Hallmark Channel movie. It actually is the setting for the 2006 Hallmark Channel movie, The Christmas Card. For the past 5 years, I have had one foot in this town, building a life, and the other immersed in a community of professionals concerned about where AI is headed. Congress will be making consequential decisions about AI in the coming years, and the people casting the votes are sitting in armchairs at forums like this one, answering questions from whoever shows up. I showed up. My heart pounded as it all became real. I was going to get up, speak into the microphone, and ask these candidates about AI. A constituent, not an expert. Questions are one of the most useful tools in a functioning democracy. They reveal truths about candidates and voters alike. When candidates hear their constituents asking about AI, they can't say, "No one cares about AI risk." I vote in every election, but I also show I care about AI risk through the questions I ask before I do. When the moderator opened the meeting up for questions from the audience, I wanted to be strategic about timing. My question is kind of intense. I'll wait a bit, so it's not so jarring, I thought. Admittedly, this was also to give myself a chance to build up the internal tension that would propel me off my seat like Squints from the movie The Sandlot declaring, "I can't take this no more," and jumping into the deep end of the pool despite not knowing how to swim. So that Wendy Peppercorn would have to save him. If you know, you know. The first audience member, an older woman with graying hair, praised the candidates' earlier talking points and then asked, "How do you feel about AI, and do you think it would be important to regulate this industry?" Wait, what? My husband and I whipped around to look at each other, jaws dropped. This was an assist I did not expect. Notice what she hadn't done. Cited a study, named a bill, used fancy jargon. It wasn't a technical question, but it effectively got everyone on the same page about where the candidates generally stood on AI regulation. This woman established that I wouldn't be weird for asking about AI, making my question all the more askable. She was there as a concerned constituent, and that was enough to put AI on the agenda for the evening. A position, or the absence of one. When you publicly ask candidates a more specific question, it forces them to take a position, or exposes that they don't have one. Either way, you learn something a campaign mailer would never tell you. A dodge in front of a full room carries a cost and gives candidates a reason to have a better answer next time. It was time. Off my seat, to the microphone, no turning back. I began setting the scene. Quote, "This past Friday, the Pentagon ended its military contract with Anthropic, one of the leading AI companies, and designated Anthropic a supply chain risk, a label typically reserved for foreign adversaries, because the company insisted on restrictions against the government using their AI for mass domestic surveillance and fully autonomous weapons. End quote. Despite the glare for taking up time from the woman in charge of the microphone, I continued, quote, "So my question is, what role do you believe Congress should play in setting legislation for the government's use of AI? And are there lines around AI usage that you believe the government should not cross?" End quote. The first audience question concerned AI regulation generally. Mine concerned the government's own use of AI. I anchored it to an event widely covered just days earlier and ended with a clear ask. Which lines would you draw? Bennett, who has a tech and military background, named two real limits. AI shouldn't be part of decisions that need a human being in them, like decisions about whom to bomb, and quote unquote warrantless surveillance of Americans has to end. Hall, a county supervisor, said she had recently attended state-level workshops on AI and presentations by lobbying organizations. Quote, "I had the opportunity to listen to a lobbyist for SEIU who was focusing exclusively on AI, and that was the most frightening presentation I'd heard all day," end quote, she said. Hall argued that the federal government should not prevent states from regulating AI. She praised Anthropic for standing up to the Pentagon and said we should support AI companies that do the same. Then Hall claimed the earlier AI question had already covered mine. It hadn't, and pivoted to how counties are adapting to AI without naming a single limit on the government's use of the technology. I asked my question in good faith. That was precisely what made the redirect costly. When a fair question gets a dodge, the candidate loses control over how the non-answer is interpreted. The record outlives the campaign. Asking questions at public forums creates a public record on the issue. I can tell you exactly what Bennett and Hall said because the exchange was recorded and posted to YouTube by Nevada County Media. Public records help voters track positions and create an accountability trail for follow-up. Neither Hall nor Bennett made it out of the primary, but the record outlives the campaign. Even if Hall were still in the race, I could ask, in March, you praised Anthropic for drawing lines on the government's use of their AI model. Do you agree those are lines the government shouldn't cross? And what would you do in Congress to draw them? Follow-ups anchored to a candidate's own words are especially hard to escape. Candidates can redirect away from your framing, but it's much harder to retreat from their own. A specific question plus a public record can change the outcome of an election. One of the most vivid historical examples comes from the 1858 Illinois Senate race between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas, champion of popular sovereignty, to let each territory vote on whether to allow slavery. At one debate, Lincoln pressed Douglas to reconcile his doctrine with the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision, which had just ruled that territories couldn't ban slavery. Did Douglas still believe the people of a territory could lawfully exclude it? Douglas answered with a loophole. Slavery couldn't survive without local police regulations, so a territory could exclude it in practice simply by refusing to pass them. The answer played fine in Illinois, where he won the Senate seat. But when Douglas ran for president 2 years later, the Southern wing of his party read his answer as a betrayal. He'd described, on record, how to nullify their victory in the courts. Rather than unite behind him, the Southern Democrats split off and ran an additional candidate, dividing their vote and landing Lincoln the presidency. So, you want to ask a candidate about AI. Campaign season is the best time to ask candidates about AI. They want your vote, so they're out at town halls and community events, easier to reach than they'll ever be in office. Here are the principles I'd hand to anyone stepping up to the microphone. You don't have to be an expert. Your job is to be a constituent. This isn't a debate. You're asking questions during an audition period to see how they will govern. A question from a local voter can carry more weight than a polished one from an out-of-district advocate. You don't have to be eloquent. The most important part is showing up and asking. Use broad questions strategically. Asking where a candidate stands on AI regulation in general can introduce the topic and create space for more specific questions. Build a specific question and give it a runway. Specific questions block the exits to candidates' comfort zones. Anchor yours to a major recent event with widespread coverage to establish context and relevance. End with an ask that demands a concrete answer. Name one bill you'd co-sponsor. Identify one use you'd prohibit. Tell us which lines you would draw. Ask in good faith. You actually want an answer, not a stumble. A gotcha buries a trap in the framing, handing the candidate a legitimate exit and letting them play the victim of the question. A fair question is costly to dodge. Don't measure success by the quality of the answer. The question succeeds when it leaves your mouth. An answer gives you substance, a dodge still gives you information. This holds even when the format works against you. The next candidate event in my district is a telephone town hall, where you submit your question ahead of time and a staffer decides whether it goes on air. I'm going to ask about AI risk. Even if my question never makes it past the screener, someone on the campaign still heard that constituents care about this issue. The next election is around the corner. Ask about AI now. Recently, I've been thinking about the groundwork needed for an international agreement to prevent a dangerous race to superintelligence, the kind of deal that becomes real and durable through Congress. My greatest concern is superintelligent AI that could deprive humanity of control over its own future and potentially cause our extinction. Your concerns might look different: jobs, surveillance, what AI is doing to your kids. But the method is the same. Not sure where to find an event to ask your question? Check campaign websites, political party calendars, social media pages, and local organizations such as libraries, chambers of commerce, and service clubs. If nothing appears, email the campaign and ask when the candidate will next be available to the public. The window is now. The general election is Tuesday, November 3rd, 2026, and the months before it are go time for asking candidates questions. The people elected in November won't get to stay stanceless. Congress is weighing whether frontier AI companies should face binding federal safety requirements, and whether states are allowed to regulate AI development at all. And as the Pentagon's fight with Anthropic shows, no one has yet drawn statutory lines around the government's own use of AI. Your representative will cast votes on these matters. A question asked now puts the issue on their desk months before it's on the House floor, giving them a reason to form a view while there's still time to form a good one. Start your search. Find one upcoming event for a candidate on your ballot. Think of a question. Then get up to the microphone and ask. Haven Harms is the founder and principal of Harms Research and Consulting, supporting organizations working on AI safety, governance, and advocacy. Dispatch from Mitch. Hugging Face found 100 million reasons to not sue OpenAI. The Hugging Face CEO has made an offer OpenAI probably can't refuse, but this may not prevent a government investigation. If you wondered why Hugging Face seemed so eager to work with OpenAI instead of suing it after a big autonomous hack, it might be because Hugging Face CEO Clem DeLange recognized an opportunity when he saw one. Returning from a visit to OpenAI headquarters, he tweeted yesterday, quote, "In the spirit of transparency, here's what I asked at OpenAI. Radical transparency. Let's release the traces from the rogue agents so the entire research community can study what happened. More capabilities for defenders. Let's commit $100 million in compute from OpenAI to help the Hugging Face community build powerful cyber defenses with the best open and closed models." The first autonomous agent cyber attack is an unprecedented event. It deserves an unprecedented response. End quote. This is high-quality maneuvering. With a handshake and a bit of a spin, Hugging Face avoids the public crassness of its lawyers demanding a $100 million settlement, while potentially extracting the same concession. Both companies come out looking more respectable than they might have in litigation, and they will no doubt save a great deal on legal fees. If I'm talking like this is a done deal, it's because I don't think it's an offer OpenAI can refuse. Litigation could result in far more, quote-unquote, radical transparency than is needed to satisfy a handshake agreement between CEOs, and be far more disruptive to operations. And if yesterday's reveals by anonymous OpenAI staffers are any indication, there's a lot going on in the lab that OpenAI would rather not come to light. From what I can tell, though, this deal doesn't necessarily get OpenAI off that hook. My understanding is that the FBI can open investigations for the sake of characterizing threats, even if it's not really expecting to charge anyone with a crime. And if the Department of Justice thinks a federal crime has been committed, they don't need the victim's request or permission to investigate. Moreover, if Hugging Face users were exposed and damaged by the attack, they may have their own grounds to request an investigation or sue either company. I am not a lawyer, though, and this isn't very well-trod ground. According to a lawyer quoted in The Economist, quote, many of these legal questions turn on intent. What did OpenAI know or foresee? End quote. Because federal anti-hacking law is aimed at intentional intrusions. I would think that yesterday's staffer reveals, combined with the warnings of experts going back decades, should be plenty of evidence that OpenAI absolutely could have foreseen that its models might go to criminal lengths to ace their tests. But given the Trump administration's short leash on the Justice Department, I think an investigation will happen if, and only if, that is something the White House decides it wants. This might be the kind of situation where it pays for OpenAI's CEO to have been so eager to give the government shares in the company as part of a larger Trump proposal to take sovereign stakes in the AI giants. And for the company's president to have donated $25 million to the MAGA Inc. Super PAC. That's all for today. Please support the AI Stopwatch podcast with a like, share, or review on your platform of choice. The analyses and opinions expressed on AI Stopwatch reflect the views of the individual contributors and the sources they cover, and should not be taken as official positions of the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. You've been listening to the AI Stopwatch Digest for Sunday, July 26, 2026, and we'll see you tomorrow.